game engines. The difficulties of game engines, why they are a struggle, why they hurt, why they make things difficult, why Halo is switching, why other games are switching, why Star Citizen has its own difficulties because of game engines. Halo is switching over to Unreal Engine. And this was announced via a video and a blog post, which we will get to in a little bit here. But I want to start from the beginning. I want to start from back when they first announced their game engine. Halo's always been running on the Blam engine, starting all the way back from Halo CE, and they've been kind of tweaking it and working with it ever since then. Hey, Bolton, thank you for the super chat, dude. Getting us started off with a Blam. So they've been going on the Blam engine for a while, and like I'm a huge fan of Halo. As I've said multiple times today, I've got the tattoo. I got it because it was just a bonding moment with my dad. It was the first Halo, it was the first game in general that I was like really able to be passionate about, and just overall an exciting time, exciting game, made a huge splash in the game industry. Halo 2 was like a great multiplayer project, and since then, Bungie kind of pivoted and they started doing other stuff, specifically Destiny kind of stuff, and they kind of got away from Halo. Halo ended up going under its own studio called 343 Studios under Microsoft, which is now being renamed to Halo Studios, which we'll get to. But back then, back when Halo 5 was out and Halo Infinite was coming up, they put out this blog post talking about, no, this is not rendezvous, what is it? Deja vu for some of you. I promise we'll get to the new stuff shortly. So 343 developed the Slipspace engine. It was part of the reason people were saying that Halo Infinite took so long. Even though it was an engine built on top of Blam, it was still a lot of responsibility, a lot of difficulty to make happen, and it took them a lot of time. But they came out with this announcement and they said, here at 343 Studios, we couldn't be more excited to share with you a glimpse of our new Slipspace engine, which will power our next title, Halo Infinite. They showed off a demo at E3 2018, which was the culmination of years of work and is infused with the passion of hundreds of people here at 343 Industries. And we have that demo. Well, we have the announcement trailer at least. So here was the beautiful announcement trailer that got everybody super hyped because of it just felt like it was going back to old style. It had a lot of the callbacks to Halo CE. It was just something people love to see. This was when everyone vomited. And even that right there was just like, second level of Halo CE. Good stuff. Callbacks. Chuncha! Yay! Woo! And then, yeah, the big reveal powered by Slipspace engine. That was kind of like the big drop that, hey, we've got an engine. Oh, and then it was good times. Good times. So that was their big announcement. Oh, a snack. Thank you. That was their big announcement. And it was big, but nobody really knew which direction it was going to take the company in or the game. But it felt good, you know? It was like, hey, Halo's a big deal. They're building an engine specifically for it. Maybe this means more franchise opportunities. Halo Wars could maybe go onto this engine. Who knew? Who knew? We know now. We'll get to that. Cliff, you worked on this trailer? That's pretty sick. Was it in-house? Were you working with 343 at the time? Did it outsource to your company or what? You're working at 343 as lead character tech artist. Holy crap. That's pretty sick, dude. That's honestly one of the big things that I still love about Halo, even if the story's not quite where it used to be or the flow of the campaign's not where it used to be. Character art's nice. It's gosh, I didn't even finish Halo Infinite. I'm not gonna lie. Shame on me. But they have some really good looks to them. The designs are really, really nice. On top of that, we also have this announcement, not an announcement rather. This was a kind of a stream that was going on about 5 months after the reveal. that talked and gave us a little bit more of the background behind Slipspace and what made the engine and how it was actually developed on top of Blam rather than being its own separate entity. But yeah, here's a little bit of a talk about kind of where Slipspace came from and how much of the Blam engine it actually includes. Check it out.
Some additional questions about the Slipspace engine. Just in general, is it carrying forward anything pre-existing from the prior games, or was it a complete from scratch rebuild?
Yeah, there's still some foundations. It wasn't a complete and total rebuild. It was a teardown of certain systems that didn't allow us to kind of scale out to the places that we wanted to be. But there's definitely still code and foundation that came from, but it's for an engineer who was on 5, but not on, and then they came and saw this, it would be a pretty foreign system, set of systems. So
gotcha.
That's I think that's the biggest thing, is to hear somebody say something like, "Hey, if you worked on the previous game, not even oh, you were on Halo 3 under Bungie. No, if you were working on the actual previous game to this game, and you came and worked on this new game, the engine would feel foreign." And it just goes to show how much an engine can change from one iteration to the next. We talk about Unreal Engine time all the time. Unreal Engine time? It's Unreal Engine time. We talk about Unreal Engine all the time. And I think the game engine discussion has only really started to get into us casuals talking about it in like the last maybe 10 years or so. And a lot of that comes from the fact that people are now presenting their game engines to the public. Epic obviously being the forefront of that. Unity is also a big candidate there. But they have actual trailers showing off their engines. And a lot of people, like us casuals, will look at something like Unreal Engine 4 versus Unreal Engine 5 and think, oh, they just, slap that update button. It's good. We're on to the next one. Slap it again. We're on Unreal Engine 6. Here we go. But the reality is that engines undergo constant development. From what I've seen, at least from what I understand, engines are undergoing constant development. The people who are working on engines aren't just working on an engine, putting it away for 2 years, and then coming back to it later to update it. They're working on it over the course of years to then put out a big patch to the rest of the developers who can use it, and that's kind of the update. And I don't really know if that's how Star Engine works for Star Citizen, because it feels like they're kind of updating it every single quarter, every single month, even, to give the developers new tools to work on, because it's just not a complete engine quite like you would expect from Unreal or Unity or even Red Engine or Gamebryo or Creation or whatever, Frostbite, any of those. All of those were packages that were built in the past and have been built on over time with big versions. But Star Engine is kind of still reaching that 1.0 launch. I mean, I feel like the trailer they gave us last year at CitizenCon was their 1.0 launch sort of thing for Star Engine, and they're not even there yet. We still don't have a lot of the stuff, not a lot of the stuff, like a few of the things that were shown in that trailer. But I think this really goes far to show just how much work and just how significant it is to switch a game engine version for developers that us casuals. I'm a casual dude. I've never been in game development. Man, I created a game in my intro to computer science class. I created a game that would challenge you to put X's on top of X's in an order that would make a pyramid. And I think just about everybody who's ever done coding went through that. But you know what was special about me? I couldn't fucking do it. So I consider myself not super great at coding. And I'm in awe of people who can. But one thing that I feel like since starting to do all of this coverage of this stuff, I've realized is that it's damn hard. And it's even harder to simultaneously make a game in the meantime. And that's something that they're going to talk about here in the announcement for this game engine overhaul that they're doing with Halo, that they basically felt like they were becoming a tech company, because you kind of have to. Like, if we hold on, let's see, let me see, How many people work on Unreal Engine at Epic? Because they make games too, right? How many players realistically? I don't know if this would be an easy answer to even get. Applying a bit late here as a result of Epic. Now some publicly available info in page 5. As of 2019, there were 564 people working on Unreal Engine. 564 people working on Unreal Engine. And so this was 2019. When was this post made? 2019. For example, 4.21 has 784. Let's see how many people worked at Epic then. 564 people working on the engine. In 2019, they had 1,900 people. Holy crap. Oh my God, that's more than I would have expected. So 25%, give or take, 25 to 30% of their people were working on the engine alone, besides all the game stuff that they were working on. Like, just engine development itself takes a lot of constant work and investment. And that kind of explains why a company like 343 Studios, now known as Halo Studios, would want to maybe focus more on the game and not so much on the tech. Yeah, Fortnite helped them get pretty big in all cases. A lot of people say CIG should have used Unreal Engine, but in reality, they would have had to do all the same stuff. What I think would have really gotten them if they had used Unreal Engine is the amount of money they would have had to pay, just forever. I don't know if you can fork it hard enough and just code it differently enough to the point where they can't charge you for using their stuff, but I'm pretty sure there's like a licensing fee for using Unreal Engine over time, right? And I imagine the bigger your game gets, the more Epic is like, hey, pay us more money. Because you're bigger. I think there are MMOs being built on Unreal Engine at this point. Again, the CryEngine wasn't built for it, right? And we're going to get to that. It's down here somewhere. Yeah, so here we're going to have a couple of interviews where Sean Tracy, who was one of the original devs working on CryEngine, talks with Gamers Nexus. We'll be looking at some of the Star Engine particulars on the wiki. And, oh, that's CitizenCon stuff. But, like, CIG didn't necessarily start on an engine that was good for MMOs. They've done a lot of work. They've sunk a lot of money into trying to get it there. And we'll touch on that. After this presentation, and they talked about Slipspace, yay, it was all great, yada, yada, yada. Halo Infinite came out. And it came out, when did it come out? Halo Infinite came out in, no, not the meme. We're not there yet. Halo Infinite came out in 2021. So in 2020 then it would have been, they gave a presentation showing Halo off, and it did not go well. Didn't go well. That's where we got Craig from. Good old Craig. We love you, buddy. You got great skincare. It's good. It's good. Look at this. Obviously the niacinamide on this guy's cheeks. He does his salicylic masks every night. Great health. But it was immortalized through the meme, and nobody will forget the reveal of Halo Infinite and how it was delayed a year, and then it came out, and it also still didn't do the best. I think there's a good game in there, but it just didn't have the time to cook that it needed. And I would love if, like, NoClip or somebody did a documentary showing how maybe the engine was to blame for that. Maybe we'll never know. But I do think building your own engine can really complicate that kind of stuff. And so in 2022, it's a couple of years after release, or 1 year after release, 343 came out, and there were some reports from inside, some rumors, some whispers, some murmurs saying 343 is apparently hoping to switch Halo's development over to Unreal Engine 5. It's not clear what this means for Halo Infinite support, but it might be happening. And this was talked about by VGC, ACG, who is a YouTuber. Very much love his YouTube videos. Go check him out. He makes some great, I would say mostly non-biased reviews of stuff. He doesn't take sponsors. He buys all the games he reviews. He has a very straightforward way of presenting his stuff, and he gets good information. But he also said, I can only confirm that many sources are saying this. It's very clear that it's already been decided, and Halo is for sure switching to Unreal. Now, here we are 3 years later, 2 years later, and it's been confirmed by the the studio themselves. We're about to watch that video and confirm it, but it really goes to show they had some internal struggles, whether it was from management or whatever it was. The engine was causing problems. And this article from The Gamer, who I appreciate as a publisher, I go to their website for a lot of the gaming news, said this wouldn't be surprising news given how many companies work with Unreal now. Most recently, CD Projekt Red revealed it would be ditching its own Red engine, switching to Unreal for the development of the fourth Witcher game. Anybody remember? There's this like small time indie project. You might have missed it. It released and it wasn't like, it didn't make much noise. It wasn't much of a splash. I don't know if it got much coverage. But it was called Cyberpunk 2077. And it came out and, you know, it had some small problems here and there. No big deal. Sony may have delisted it from their store. I don't know who's to say that's a big deal or not. I don't know. But they were working with their own engine for a long time, and they released the game, and it was painful. It hurt. It physically hurt. I'm pretty sure I streamed it when it came out, and we did like a subathon, and I enjoyed the game itself, but like it was rough. It's made its way back to, you know, the limelight, and I think people really appreciate the game for what it is. People are obsessed with it now, but that game is like a big part of the reason that CD Projekt Red, one of the most beloved RPG makers of our current and past generation, is switching away from their own game engine, which they were also using for a long time. So a lot of these game companies that work on huge franchises are now switching to game engines that they don't have to develop themselves, because as games get more complicated, so does the maintenance of the game engine that runs them. And we can see similarly, this came after Cyberpunk 2077's troubled development. We were also recently told that Tekken 8 is being developed in Unreal. Now, I'm not a fighting person. You know this from my Star Citizen coverage. I'm like more of a trading economy, fun build up kind of person. I like to shoot. I mean, Halo was like my upbringing, but I never really got into like Street Fighter or Tekken or Marvel vs. Capcom. I was big on the Super Smash Bros. Though, but I don't know much about Tekken, but it apparently is a big deal that they're switching over to Unreal as well. And it's just going to show how many games are starting to switch over Unreal Engine. You can even go to Epic's website and see there are some big games. Dune Awakening, obviously. There's a lot of like, I guess there's a Star Wars game working with it. Fortnite is a very, very clear example of games using Unreal Engine. Rocket League is there. I guess there's a Marvel thing going on there too. And you could just go through the list. Black Myth, popular game using Unreal Engine. Keep scrolling down and you've got, I don't know any of these. Empire of Ants, of course, is, Tekken 8 was not the best use of Unreal Engine. Ouch. Sometimes it doesn't work out, huh? Empire of the Ants, though. How about that? How about Empire of the Ants? Oh, it's not even out yet, so you don't know. Spoiler alert. There's ants in it. Rocket League, as we said, oh no, this is Rocket Racing. I'm sorry, Fortnite Rocket Racing. Lego Fortnite is there. Why don't I know any of these games? Perfect Dark, there we go. That's a game I'm really looking forward to. Unreal Engine, Perfect Dark. Redfall, huge success. Unreal Engine. This isn't not a good presentation of the games you can get from it. Senua's Saga, that's a good game. I know some people didn't like that there wasn't much gameplay involved in it, but beautiful game. Unreal Engine. Stalker 2, I'm looking forward to that. Unreal Engine. Starship Simulator, looking like a pretty cool game. Unreal Engine. Outer Worlds 2. Unreal Engine. Now I want to know, was the original Outer Worlds built on Unreal Engine? Let's see. Outer Worlds engine, yeah, Unreal. So there are a lot of franchises that use this engine, and it's kind of nuts to think that the company that made Unreal Tournament, that made freaking Gears of War, is now making Fortnite and hosts the biggest used engine in the industry. But that's the way it is, and a lot of people are using it. So let's listen to kind of what they had to say about their own adoption of this engine over at Halo and why they're getting into it. Here's the announcement.
Chris Matthews, take 1. Mark.
This is Casey Wu, take 1. Mark.
I was told that I can just be my authentic self, Chris.
For 6 years, I don't want to be in front of a camera.
There's so much to do and so much fun to be had when you play Halo that I feel like I never run out of things to do.
I love intricate stories that take place across lots of different worlds, have lots of different meaningful characters.
What made Halo successful at the beginning? What is the legacy of Halo, and what's the soul that we want to bring forward, and what's the craft of making Halo games, and how do we set our studio up?
Okay, this is the COO. I just want to emphasize that because we're going to come back to what she's saying in a little bit here.
What we want to bring forward, and what's the craft of making Halo games, and how do we set our studio up best to go deliver on that?
We knew we had to make a change in order to take us into the future.
When I first heard about Halo moving to Unreal Engine, my first thought was, this is going to be a really hard secret to keep.
I think fans are going to be excited about the future of Halo because of the possibilities that are afforded us by using Unreal.
Before, we really had to split our focus in thinking about building an engine, supporting it, being really kind of a tech company and a studio at the same time.
Okay, there it is. That, I think, is the biggest statement that comes out of this whole video. And spoiler alert, I haven't actually watched the whole video, so I might be completely wrong about that. But there was a video I put out. I'm not going to find it now. There's no point. There's a video I put out earlier this year that started out with the idea that CIG feels more like a tech company than a game company. And up until this point, I think up until 4.0, that's really the position they held. 3.x of updates in Star Citizen, in my opinion, was all about just distracting us until they had the ability to actually make a game. They wanted to just distract us and give us stuff to play that was like decent so that they could build Squadron 42 and build the engine and then get back to finally building the game that we want, which was Star Citizen. Some people like Squadron, and I'm down for that. I think Squadron will be cool, but a lot of people are here for Star Citizen, and they weren't ready to make that. And I think that idea of being a tech company when you have to develop your own engine is a really important thing to consider when games are no longer what they were when we were releasing on the Xbox 360 or the Nintendo Wii. We're like, these things are just multi-hundreds of millions of dollars projects with thousands of people working on them. You got to keep so much documentation. You got to keep so many different workarounds and optimizations. You got to make sure that everybody who comes into your company not only knows how to make a game, but knows how to use the specific shaped hammer that you made to make those games. It's a bad metaphor. Imagine I said building first. Like, if your game is a building and the game engine is the scaffolding, those people not only have to know how to use the specific hammers to build that building, but they also got to use the specific scaffolding that you've built to build the building. And there's a really good example of this in Star Citizen's own library called Mighty Bridge, which is something that they built out so that people could jump into their game engine, not have to know how to use their specific game engine, but rather use a tool that they built custom so that you could use the tools you were used to, like Houdini, and import that work into the game. It's like an optimization to make the game engine easier to make without having to learn exactly how the game engine works. So here's a little explainer of that from the folks at the studio working at CIG.
Why Mighty Bridge is important is there's a lot of technical resources and knowledge in all kinds of amazing tools, like, as I mentioned before, Houdini. And by providing a way that artists can interact with the editor from the tools that they know and love and have learned to use over many, many years, they can make more easily the stuff that they want.
There's no time in between of like thinking about the logistics of everything. It just like does it for you.
We made the Mighty Bridge thinking about the future so that if we want to use other technology, we can plug them into the editor using it. And for example, if we want to use Blender or 3ds Max or Maya or Substance Designer, for example, that we are using. But if we want to plug them into the editor, we could use Mighty Bridge to do that.
Tools programming is core to whoever interacts with anything to make content.
I've been working in the industry for 15 years. I never found a project that has such ambitions. And I feel like this game tends to always say there is a goal and we will do whatever it takes to reach that goal.
Mighty Bridge is just one
I'm sorry.
of the ways.
I think I missed the important part of that segment, so we're going to go back real quick to here. They're going to talk about the tool and what it's used for here. Sorry.
There's a lot of technical resources.
Jeez, I'm butchering this. We got this. Just load, please. YouTube!
CPN adapt the content to the game level result.
Wait, hold on. Where is this? Okay, here we go. This is the part you want to know. I'm sorry.
One recent example of a tool we developed is the Mighty Bridge.
Mighty Bridge is a plugin for the game editor that link the game editor to any other software.
Right now, the main usage is to be able to work in Houdini and have some effects directly in editor.
With the Mighty Bridge, the communication is done in two-way direction. It can send information and ask stuff to Houdini, for example, and Houdini, while doing the computation, is able to say, okay, you want to place a cave here? Give me all the objects in this 50 meters radius so that I can adapt the recipe and then send back the result. And with other technology, you don't have that two-way communication. So it's also help us doing more complex recipe and adapt the content to the game level.
The reason why the Mighty Bridge is important is there's a lot of...
So I think that sold the idea. Mighty Bridge, basically, is a tool that allows... It's a plugin that allows industry standard software to work inside of this proprietary engine. Basically, if you were going to work on some engine, let's call it the... I don't know, what would be a good name? Let's call it the tomato juice engine for building out some kind of a movie set design. And you had to use Blender to create the 3D renders for it. I could plug in my garden soil tool into the... Crap, what was the name of the engine? The tomato juice engine, we'll call it that. Your garden soil tool plugs into the tomato juice engine to grab Blender assets and put them straight into there. That way, the people who are coming in don't have to learn the tomato juice engine. They already know how Blender works. And the garden soil just takes that Blender work and puts it straight into tomato juice. That's what I called it before. Cool. I'm consistent. At least there's that. That's what allows you to kind of optimize the ability of having your own game engine. And I think you can't do this kind of stuff if you don't have a ridiculous budget. Now, I'm not trying to validate the fact that CIG has gone through so much money. Obviously, there are things that they could have done that were more efficient, but when they set out on making this project, a lot of the stuff that exists in gaming didn't exist back then. If they had taken Unreal Engine back then, they probably would have still had to do just as much work because Unreal Engine didn't support it. Epic was working on it in parallel, but they couldn't have, like, I don't know if Epic would have told them, hey, we're working on this, just wait till we got it, or if they would have literally worked on it in parallel and not known until Epic revealed what they were doing. Either way, whatever Epic is working on isn't tailor-made for what Star Citizen is. So there's this decision that you have to make when you're picking a game engine. Do you want to go with the cookie cutter method of picking a game engine that's available to the whole market and then edit that to work for your specific need? Or do you want to pick something that's kind of just lay of the land and then edit it over time and get it to that point anyways? And I don't think anybody can really say what was right or what was wrong. But I don't think they had much of a choice. Like, again, the CryEngine thing, lawsuits withstanding, all that stuff, I don't know the drama that's there. I think that picking the CryEngine both worked for CIG because A, they were able to pick up a ton of the OG devs who worked on CryEngine, one of which we are going to talk about it here in a little bit. But two, they picked an engine that doesn't seem to ask them to pay royalties all the time, which Unreal Engine would have. That being said, it really feels like at the end of the day, game engine maintenance is incredibly expensive, intensive, and exhausting to do. And they have this idea of a game that there aren't very many engines out there that are capable of making. And I'm going to be interested to see how it bounces off the rest of the engines in the industry, and how different game companies also come up with the same stuff. It's kind of like when you see Android and iPhone, or Android and iOS come out with similar features at the same time, because not necessarily they're copying each other, but it's just like how technology has allowed advancements to come about, different features and things like that. You see it in cars, you see it in phones, you see it in computers and CPUs. All this stuff seems to develop in parallel because the underlying technology is advancing underneath them that allows them to do it, whether it's internet speeds, whether it's capacitors on CPUs, whether it's I don't know, the ability for computer memory to hold things in memory for you to use. There's a lot of things that allow for new technologies to develop at different companies at the same time, even though they don't know. And so I think that it's not a coincidence that Unreal Engine's coming out with something like this, that CIG is coming out with something like this, that reportedly Rockstar with their Rage engine is coming out with something that looks like server meshing. It's all kind of developing at the same time. And my friend Panic Switched, who is in the chat with us right now, talked about this at his in our podcast last year, and he coined the term, and I love it, server meshing being kind of like the next generation of loading screens, and that everybody eventually is going to be doing something similar to it. It's just a matter of when your game calls for it, or when the thing that you're doing calls for it. And maybe someday Halo will be doing it, but for now Halo has decided I call it Halo because now they're called Halo Studios, and I saw somebody on Twitter make the joke, if it was the Slipspace engine that killed Halo, or no, sorry, you can't say that 343 killed Halo anymore, because now they've renamed their name to Halo Studios, so you have to say that Halo killed Halo, which is a checkmate move. But yeah, now that they've called themselves Halo Studios, basically you say Halo Studios has chosen to go with Unreal Engine because they don't have to worry about all that kind of stuff anymore. Somebody else is handling the engine development for them. Trying to think of like a good modern other industry example of this. Like with phones, that's a good one. A lot of phones have components that are manufactured by other people. Almost every phone on the market gets its screen technology from Samsung, because Samsung just has put a ton of money into developing glass screens for touch screens, and they're just good at that. It's much better for companies like Acer or Asus, or ROG is an Asus brand, or Google, or even Apple, to just be like, hey, we'll just buy our screen from Samsung and use that for our phone instead of sinking money into it to develop it ourselves. That's kind of how people are treating the game engine. Like, if I want to make a new Cyberpunk sequel or a Witcher 4, I'm just going to have people make the game engine underlying for me, and then all the people who are coming to work at my company know how to use it already, all good to go. Check the PAX Day server meshing demo. Not a good MMO, but a good example of meshing in UE 5.5. Okay, so they're using they're using Unreal Engine for their tech. And Apple has slowly moved the majority of their components in-house, but not all yet. And that's a whole nother angle, right? That goes beyond game engines, that goes beyond tech, is this sort of meta of once you become a big enough company, you can start to build the components yourselves to lower the prices. I think it was, I think IKEA really got ahead by doing something like that. The more manufacturing you can bring under your own roof, the cheaper it gets. And in the long run, that's good. But in the short term, it's expensive as because you gotta pay for all of the R&D, you got to pay for all of the patents, for all of the talent to come in and do it. I know one of the guys who is building up the server meshing technology for Star Citizen. I think like the first time he was on ISC was just this recent check-in they did back in August or July maybe about server meshing. He was working on simultaneous server loading stuff, majiggas, in Unreal Engine. Or was it Unity? I don't remember. He was working on this kind of technology in a completely different engine back in 2018. And CIG snatched him up and said, hey, we want to build this for our own engine. Come work for us. And over the last 5 years, he's been building it for them. And it's like making those kinds of investments into people and technology is the stuff you have to do in order to get this under your own roof, which is expensive right now. That's why CIG burns through so much money. But in the long term, that could really benefit them, especially if they're thinking about making other games. We won't get into that conversation because that's a bucket of conversation. But let's listen to what Halo Studios, as they're now calling themselves, had to say more about this switch over to Unreal Engine and where they're going, what direction they're going in with it.
We've made the change to shift to UE. We can bring Halo forward in ways that people have never seen before while still being true to what Halo is.
The Foundry project was an effort to show ourselves how far we can push things using Unreal 5.
New studio art director, Chris, came to me and said, hey, I have this crazy idea.
He said, hey, there's this thing called Project Foundry that I want to do. Let's make it happen.
Foundry specifically is based around the same concept of the Foundry in Halo lore. It's the place where Halo rings are born.
Oh God, they're getting me with the music.
It's not a game, it's a research project for our studio so we can prepare ourselves for the next steps.
Oh my God, holy oh, Jesus. Can I just interject? Can we please get more back into the Flood again? That really made the Halo stories interesting. Okay, sorry, back to it.
The original Halo franchise was a graphics showcase. It was best in class. That's what Halo was when it first was released, and that's what Halo needs to be again.
I don't think there's any gameplay here. This is just a studio announcement. They're not showing off any games.
So once Project Foundry had been approved, we took the entire creative team and we ideated on 3 locations, something old, something new, and something really alien.
We had the Pacific Northwest, which is sort of traditional Halo biome.
We were trying to shove as much foliage in there as humanly possible to make it really feel like you're on a hike in the, Cascades.
The Coldlands, which was the second biome that we took on, it was more of a technical showcase where we could play with shaders, we could play with deformable landscapes and terrains. Unreal affords us more opportunity than we've ever had in the past.
On the surface, it might just look all like snow, but how many layers of things combine to really give that winter look?
And then our third biome was the Blightlands, which is any land that's been completely taken over by the Flood.
I wanted to give our team the opportunity to really express an alien world, a really alien world, taking something way further than they may have actually done in previous Halo games.
What's impressed me about watching the Halo team work in Unreal is how beautiful everything looks, how incredible the environments look. I don't think we've seen anything quite like it in Unreal Engine before.
Fortunately, we have a studio that's really passionate about Halo, about the look and the feel, and I think there's a lot of hunger.
Can I go back to that? Actually, that's an interesting. This is heavy on the marketing, of course, but it is interesting to hear somebody comment about how their engine is being used by a specific studio to look good. So I think the simple way of considering it is like, oh, you're using this engine, you're just plugging in the stuff that the engine developers have given you and you're making your game look good. But it is interesting to hear somebody from the creator of the engine say, hey, they've utilized our technology and made something that looks better than what we've seen otherwise. Who knows if that's true? Like I said, this is marketing stuff, but it's an interesting angle in my opinion it could just be generic PR speak, of course. But getting past what he actually said and just ripping it down to the base layer of the fact that it can be different based on who's using that engine, I think is something that is not as obvious in a casual conversation about game engine and development. Is like, it's not just the engine, it's how somebody utilizes it. Like, people don't think Unity engine can look good, right? Because a lot of projects that come from Unity end up being very small scale, independent projects. But like, if somebody can take it and utilize the tools that are given in Unity, they can still make something that looks beautiful. And I think that gets missed a lot when it comes to game development.
The Halo team working on Unreal is how beautiful everything looks, how incredible the environments look. I don't think we've seen anything quite like it in Unreal Engine before.
Fortunately, we have a studio that's really passionate about Halo, about the look and the feel, and I think there's a lot of hunger to really collaborate, to move forward together.
Foundry was an initiative that touched on every part of the creative process, everything from concept art, VFX, characters, vehicles, and weapons to make the future games of Halo.
Creating an asset, taking this design, now we can really dig into material foundations. What is it actually made of? How is it physically accurate to the world? Now we get to take all the wonderful legacy assets that we have, bring them to life, and bring them to today's standards.
We are really excited to be not just
that's a classic Halo track.
Also expanding our studio.
As a lifelong Halo player, I think the game's only going to get better.
Oh my
when we
gosh.
Get those new
I'm still surprised at how much just the music. Martin O'Donnell, right, did the first soundtrack. I am so surprised at how much the music can get like a response from me just hearing it. I immediately go back to reverse playing Assault on Control Room after the flood has taken over in Halo Combat Evolved when I hear this song. And I know for a fact that's where this song was played. Freaking great. This video is 18 hours old. Just got in. It's a fresh off the press.
Perspectives and people bring in their expertise and passion for the Halo franchise.
We are looking for new talent as the projects that we're working on kind of get further and further into their development cycles.
And it is great to be part of a team that's growing because you can kind of see that force multiplied as people come in and take on challenges and you can do more.
Imagine a place where you have the commitment that this is what we want to do, Halo games, and create those experiences. And you can express your talent, your creativity, and your professional ambitions in that place.
We're looking for designers, we're looking for artists, we're looking for engineers.
It feels like a new beginning for the studio in a lot of ways, and I think that's pretty rare.
And I think we arrived now at a point where you see the beginnings of people to start to believe in the process.
There's so much momentum that we have right now and focus and clarity on not just what we're building, but why we're building and kind of this next phase of Halo.
The worlds that we're building, the stories that we're going after.
The potential at Halo right now is huge.
Halo Infinite was the last remnants of how we made Halo games in the past. That was our recipe. And what we are doing right now, we're changing that recipe.
All right, I feel like the music was doing a lot of heavy lifting in this video because it just gets that response. But yeah, so they are rebranding. The whole, hey, with a new name, I feel like I can move ahead and we can leave behind some of the past decisions I made. And I can let you all know that I am truly sorry for what decisions were made under that name. But here I am, a new Halo. We'll have to see if this really means anything. This video is not about the potential success of a new Halo. There are plenty of channels that'll be going over that on YouTube, I'm sure. I've already seen plenty of them. And I mean, from Xperia to freaking, I don't know, even Level Cap probably is putting out something about it. It's a rebranding. And like somebody said earlier on, it's not just a rebranding that gets you success and a new upcoming and to get back into the limelight. You got to change your culture a little bit. And there was clearly, I think, anybody who was following the Halo development of Infinite saw that there were some issues going on. There were some people in high places moving around at very interesting times in the development of Infinite that may have signaled that there were problems and disagreements going on throughout the time. So I had a little bit here talking about how The Witcher also crossed over to Unreal Engine. This was a pretty big announcement, and specifically it was about how The Witcher 4 was switching over to Unreal Engine. And we can listen a little bit here to what they had to say about why they switched over to, as opposed to just, you know, smaller companies or even a company like 343 switching. Listen in.
Our cooperation with Epic has just started. It was the shift towards open world support that brought Unreal Engine 5 to our attention.
So there was one demo that happened last year that was the medieval environment demo, where at one point there's a notice board that looks strangely familiar to things we've done in the past that has even a sign that says Monster Slayer Wanted. And I'm like, are they trying to tell us, you know, come over to Unreal Engine, look how great your games could look on there? Was that whole demo made with that nefarious purpose? I don't know, but it definitely caught my eye.
This opens a new chapter for us where we really want to see how our experience in building open world games gets combined with all the engineering power of Epic.
One of the things that is really important to keep in mind when talking about open world games versus, let's say, more linear games is the possibilities of the things that can go wrong, or the scenarios that you have to consider are exponentially higher than linear games. Players can go in whatever direction that they want. They can handle content in any order that they want, theoretically. And to really encapsulate that means that you need a really stable environment where you can be able to make changes with a high level of confidence that it's not going to break in 1,600 other places down the line.
Unreal Engine is like a toolbox which has a lot of features, a lot of solutions already there that allow teams to just try new stuff. The fact that Unreal is used by a lot of teams already in the world, a lot of perspectives are projected into the design of the tools, and that helps the tool to be way more agile. So all in all, it's a really, really cool technology to like prototype and make environments really quickly, really beautiful, and very realistic.
Epic and
I
CD
think
Projekt Red.
what he was saying about having an open world game versus a linear game is kind of a key point, especially because Star Citizen itself is not just open world, but MMO. So you have not just the fact that people are going to go in all the different directions, but people are also going to with other people. Like, people are going to do a lot of things that you can't plan for when you're building an engine. So on top of the fact that it's not a linear single player engine, not just an open world engine, it's an engine that's supporting an MMO, means that on top of the 1,600, what did he say? I'm sure he was just saying things off the top of his head, but he was saying like 1,600 possibilities in an open world engine. How many millions of possibilities is that with an MMO? And how can you plan for that when you're building an engine out as opposed to using somebody else's engine?
To consider are exponentially higher than linear games. Players can go in whatever direction that they want. They can handle content in any order that they want, theoretically. And to really encapsulate that means that you need a really stable environment where you can be able to make changes with a high level of confidence that it's not going to break in 1,600 other places down the line.
Yeah, that's...
Unreal Engine type and make environments really quickly,
it's just
really beautiful. And
oh, come on, IGN with your video player. It really like speaks to how stupidly hard it is to run a game engine yourself. And as Virtual was saying in chat, a lot of developers are realizing just how much work it is to maintain your own engine. Again, with how big video games have gotten. I don't think anybody who was making video games in the 90s would understand just how ridiculously big of a market video games have become in the 20s. There's a really good infographic for this, how video game industry has expanded, that shows how much more money there is involved in video games since its inception. Wait until this loads. Come on. Ugh. Do I really have to go through LinkedIn for this? Is there no better source? Video game industry growth. Come on. There we go. Freaking LinkedIn. Are you kidding me? So, like, you can see from, obviously, the 70s is pretty long ago. But even in the 90s, right around this period, look at how much smaller this is compared to what the gaming industry now is. And I know a lot of that is mobile. But even, like, the PC and the console space have gotten relatively larger since that period. And it's just like, yeah, building your own engine back then, or even at 2010 was one thing. But building it now, there's so much more potential going forward, especially with things like AI developments that you can plug in and get more productivity out of the stuff you're doing. Yeah, CIG has their own engine team. They can control what's added in as time goes on, but that's expensive. And when a lot of people hear the production costs of Star Citizen, they're thinking about the game production costs. But how much of that cost is just going into the people making the engine? Making the documentation for that engine? Rehiring and retraining people to run that engine. It's ridiculous. And they're trying to do that on top of also building 2 games at the meantime. Like, building a game at the same time as an engine sounds like a bad idea. But yeah, that was where was that? Here? Let's finish that to see what else they had to say about it. Because this was a look at kind of The Witcher and CDPR overall switching over to Unreal Engine.
And very realistic. Epic and CD Projekt Red are the 2 companies that really want to achieve something great. We won't stop just, by developing some features. We won't stop there, yeah? We will continue to work together to achieve something extraordinary in the end.
Okay, so just another example of a big game company. Tekken, Halo, Cyberpunk, whatever it is, switching over to Unreal Engine, which a lot of people use.
Damon here in today's gaming news.
Whoa!
Bethesda.
Whoa! Settle down, dude. And like we've scrolled through, Marvel, Star Wars, Fortnite, all kinds of developers. Fortnite obviously is made by the same company, but all kinds of different developers, people working on Dune Awakening. Tetris is on Unreal Engine. Freaking Yoshi, Final Fantasy, Batman, Star Wars, Borderlands, Kingdom Hearts, Hellblade, Black Myth, Gears of War, of course, on Unreal Engine. It's just easier that way. So, taking all of that and the context of Halo moving over, allowing them to have more time to work on their own game, and I want to draw the emphasis on Star Citizen itself. And this has been a long-term process they've been going through to try and get Star Engine to have its own, its ability to punch at its weight class and be able to hold its own in an industry where it doesn't have any engine that's catering to the needs it has. 64-bit precision, which Unreal now has. Server meshing, which Unreal has a version of. Object container streaming. All the different things that might make it unique, but also the things that they do have to rebuild that other modern engines might have. CryEngine in 2013, which is what they're working off of, doesn't have all of the tools that a game engine like Unreal Engine 5 will have. That doesn't mean that they're building Unreal Engine 5 from scratch or rebuilding the wheel. It just means that they're trying to build a game engine that stays in line and competitive with the rest of the game industry. And they can't do that on their own version because their version is different from CryEngine, it's different from Lumberyard, it's different from Unity or Unreal Engine or Frostbite or Snowdrop or anything else. They have to build then their own versions of all of these same things. And that's both a gift and a curse because, yeah, they can develop this stuff on their own for what's best for their game, but they also can't just pick and choose the little features that they need from the overarching owner of the game engine they're using. Does that make sense? Like, they can't just be like, oh, we're using CryEngine. It looks like CryEngine brought in global illumination. Let's just pull that out of what they've done and put it into our game. They have to build their own version of it because they've had to build the game engine themselves. That's at least the way I understand it. I may be wrong about that, but that's how it's coming off to me. So here is a little talk that Gamers Nexus does. Great channel. Shout out to them. Give them a follow if you want more of the kind of more in-depth discussion about gaming stuff than what a normal publication would do. But they're talking to Sean Tracy, who is one of the original CryEngine developers. Not original, but one of the CryEngine developers from the time when a lot of CryEngine developers went over to CIG and Star Citizen. Just sort of talking about what this engine is and why they're doing it themselves.
The first kind of question to bring up, in our interview with Chris, he mentioned the concept of, I used the word CryEngine,
yeah,
which got the response, well, it's not really CryEngine anymore.
Yeah, right.
So the working title we had then was Star Engine.
So yeah, so Star Engine's been kind of bounced around. I don't know how.
Kind of crazy, right? That Star Engine was something that they were talking about. This is an interview from 2016, and they only officially unveiled CryEngine last year in full trademark name.
How absolutely official it is or anything like that, but yeah, I mean, it's a pretty different version than what the CryEngine is. We branched quite a while ago, so we haven't taken a new CryEngine version for quite some time. It's about the 3.7, 3.8 area of CryEngine, so this was early last year. It might have even been before that, where we branched off. So we branched off entirely because it was getting really difficult to take the integrations. At some point when you're developing your game on middleware, you're gonna get to the point that pulling integrations is hard because you've customized it so much for your game. So whatever changes you make to underlying engine systems, when there's a fundamental change that comes in from your middleware provider, it's pretty difficult to consume that all the time. And then you start being selective. Okay, well, we'll take this feature, but we won't take this feature. And what you don't know right out of the gate is if there's any interdependency on it, what's going to happen. And then you find that out usually the hard way later on. So we tried to stop doing that. We do cherry pick on occasion from our particular code base that we have up to, and again, I was pretty sure it was 3.7 or 3.8. I just can't remember the exact version number.
Right.
But yeah, we've made some pretty major changes, and it's been ongoing for a while for CIG. Of course, I only came on about 2.5 years ago from Crytek after supporting them with their engine drop versions, and as soon as they were done getting the engine, I'm like, all right, I better get over there, you know. So one of the big fundamental changes, and Chris had mentioned it, was the support for 64-bit positioning, right? Now, what's a lot of people I think maybe misunderstand is that it wasn't an entire conversion for the whole engine. The engine split up into very independent and you know, not as much as they should be, but isolated modules, right? They do talk to each other, of course, but things like physics, things like render, things like AI, what are the purposes of changing the AI to 64-bit? Well, all the positioning that it will use will be changed to 64-bit, but the AI module itself doesn't really care, you know. So there was a lot of changes to support this large world coordinates. And it's actually pretty crazy. I have it written up on my wall, the actual maximum. It's 18 zeros that we can support in terms of space, which is crazy because especially for...
I guess that's a floating point limit or something at that point.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, and at that point, like, I mean, you just can't have any more within the memory. So it's pretty weird for people that have you know, come over from Crytek that have worked on just CryEngine normally, because, and Chris had mentioned this, you're working on like a 4 to, I mean, maximum 8 kilometers of level. And already at that scale, I felt like that was pretty big. But when it's such a you know, for lack of a better word, it just messes with your mind in the large world coordinates, because you'll be sitting there working on something and then you sort of start to zoom out and you're like, sort of start to zoom out a bit more and you're like, and it just keeps going. It really messes with your sense of scale, though, because it can be pretty confusing. Again, if you're looking at a planet, like, I mean, you're looking at thousands of kilometers of area.
Right.
So it can get very easy to underestimate how large the undertaking of just populating something of
playable
that
area
scale.
too, not just
exactly
yeah.
right. So that can really mess with your mind. But that's one of the bigger changes we made, of course, with the implementation of planets, but more just with the positioning of it, right? So now I think in the first system that we're going to do. And just right now, and this is maybe quantum travel speeds will change or so, but it takes about 45 minutes at our jump or quantum jump speed to cross an entire system. So that's just one system. And if you want to think of the systems,
I think it's really a testament to how much the community has changed, or maybe how much the expectations have changed. That if he said that it would take 45 minutes to move across the Stanton system right now, there would be like 20 Reddit threads, 17 different emails to partner companies of CIG, and probably an entire ISC that had to be dedicated to talking about how that's not on every quantum travel system. That's just on the worst of components. But things have really changed in terms of expectations and how the game works since then, because 45 minutes in quantum travel in Stanton would have people literally setting the office on fire.
As levels, I guess, in themselves, that's kind of how you would think about it. There would be basically no loading for 45 minutes of quantum travel, which is the actual realistic value of 0.2 c, which is the 0.2 times the speed of light. So it's crazy how large that area is.
They definitely sped things up, probably for the better though.
And stuff like that, so it is kind of cool.
So the 64-bit conversion, again, I guess the clarity to be made is that it's not the entire engine.
That's
so
right, and it didn't
modules.
need to be the entire engine, right? Yeah, that was the big piece of clarity, I think, and a lot of people have this understanding. I think it's just easier to understand. Oh, yeah, they converted the engine to 64-bit.
Right.
Well, okay, there was stuff within the engine that already was 64-bit. What we really needed was physics and positioning to be,
right?
And that's what got changed. So,
and to put that into perspective for folks, the world space coordinates is one of the big impacts from that. You've got more space you can work with.
That's right.
Is there anything else specifically that you benefit from by making the conversion?
To 64-bit?
Yeah.
Not that I can think of right out of the gate. No, it's more just supporting the actual space itself more than anything. It's not better performance or anything. If anything, it's a bit worse. But I mean, we're talking marginal differences. Like, I mean, if anything, it's actually a tiny bit slower. But with newer CPUs, actually, we did make a change to how the positioning works, so actually it ends up being faster. But normally, if you were just going to switch over to 64-bit positioning, you would be a little bit slower in your math. So the only benefits we get is just the sheer amount of space that we can support for the players, and they have to have that amount of space for a game that's in space.
Right,
makes sense.
For procedural generation tech for the planets. So procedural generation version 2.0 is kind of the big topic.
Yeah, right.
There's a lot we can talk about here technically. We were talking with Chris, as I said, there's another video on that. So there's biome.
So Steve Burke. Yeah, Steve Burke. Dude. He looks so much more comfortable now when he does videos. Like, this dude really grew into his position at Gamers Nexus. I don't know when he started. I don't know when Gamers Nexus really started to hit these kind of interviews and get big on YouTube, but this interview, he feels a lot more kind of reserved than I would expect now, seeing him on YouTube and doing his stuff. But dude's amazing. The channel's amazing. Gamers Nexus does great stuff. They're interviewing Sean Tracy, who is one of the Crytek developers who moved over to CIG when Crytek wasn't really paying their folks. And that was probably one of the biggest things that saved CIG in making Star Citizen, is that they picked up a lot of the people who developed the original engine that they forked off of to make Star Engine. And as much crap as people give to Star Citizen for not necessarily releasing a game right yet, which they've been working for a while without releasing a game, they have built a game engine off of Crytek in no small part due to people like Sean Tracy, who have stuck around and really dug into the actual code of what the engine is and made it possible, which is the whole topic of today. Going back to Halo and what has happened to them this could be the kind of thing that stopped CIG from having the same kind of story as what's going on with 343 and their rebranding and their move to a different, more universal standard of game engine for development. And I think it's really interesting looking at this whole conversation surrounding how game engines are utilized and built and how they have to be maintained. They did partially work on Lumberyard, yes. In fact, we can see that here. So this is the wiki page, which talks a little bit about StarEngine. Talks about how StarEngine is a heavily refactored version of CryEngine from Crytek, used since the first in-engine video. They have a source here. First in-engine video would be the Squadron 42 video in 2012. It was released at the start of the crowdfunding campaign. More specifically, the last CryEngine update integrated into Star Citizen's code was patch 3.8, CryEngine patch 3.8. This heavily modified version has been internally named StarEngine since September 2016 at the latest, before moving to Amazon Lumberyard. So StarEngine, which we all saw last year, whether you saw it at CitizenCon or you saw it at another watch through, or you saw Asmongold reacting to it. I don't even think he got to the end of the video. Oh, yeah, here you did.
Yeah, probably is. You can tell it's fake because the Earth isn't flat. Yeah, by now, like, you know this shit's fake. This is amazing. I'm gonna be honest, guys. I could watch this for an hour.
Oh, just wait, dude. You'll spend dozens of hours watching it at a standstill because you can't get out of your space station, but it's okay. We've all been through that. Anyways, plenty of places that you could have seen the StarEngine presentation. It took them a solid 11 years to get from the Crytek engine that they started developing on to commercially unveiling the StarEngine, even though they were calling it that since 2016. It's a long freaking time. So on 2016, December 23rd, CIG announced with the release of StarEngine 2.6 that it's moving to Amazon Lumberyard game engine, which is also based on CryEngine. This is a very confusing part of the development because they were moving to Lumberyard, but they were still developing their own specific version of CryEngine. They were doing this in order to utilize the integrated Amazon Web Services and cloud computing features to support next-generation online gaming. So when somebody tells you that this is a game based on the Lumberyard engine, the only reason it's based on that is because they wanted to get AWS services, AWS, whatever. I just said Amazon Web Services, and the cloud computing features of Lumberyard to work with them. It's not because they wanted Amazon to do what Epic does for a lot of people. They didn't want Amazon to be the company that developed the engine for them. They just wanted some of the benefits of what Amazon offered in their version. It is not known which version of Lumberyard is currently integrated into StarEngine and how CIG will handle future iterations, but that is the way it is. StarEngine aims, among others, to be seamless without loading screens or invisible walls, despite being massively multiplayer. So there's a lot of things that they've added to it. 64-bit precision, object container streaming, which is a big part, the mega map feature, the zone system feature, local physics grids, the room system, which we're starting to now get from engineering and life support. You can kind of see even in recent ISC episodes, they've shown how the life support system will fill a room with oxygen. In fact, I think I've got some footage here that supports that. So here is footage from, I think 2018, maybe 2017. This is footage of them testing this room system out in the engine. This is their development process from 7 years ago now. Just trying to figure out how they can get gases to move from one room into another based on human interaction. You can see all the numbers processing, the mass, all that kind of stuff going on in behind the scenes there. Got another one here that shows a little bit of a better overview of it. Again, this is from 2017. Hello, Luna Maria. Welcome to the stream today. So you can see atmosphere volumes opening, closing, of doors, changing the way that it's balanced, all that jazz, to now we can go into the ISCs that they've shown us just very recently. And we can see the way that they have now developed a system that both in-game objects and the players themselves can interact with the atmosphere being vented via this room system. So this is all the kind of stuff that gets built into an engine that makes it work a little bit better for the specific needs that they have. Subsumption AI is another one. The Apollo tool is what handles that. Procedural generated planets. I think we're going to get a big presentation on that at CitizenCon. They're now starting to use machine learning to help build those things out faster so that systems might be able to come faster. We'll see if that happens. Universe Simulator, I believe, is referring to what they call now StarSim. Persistence, which we've seen with persistent entity streaming and the entity graph. The item port system is what allows them to switch items over in ships. Grabby hands, which is no longer happening, but is something that they worked on for a little bit. And just other things. Over the course of time, they've developed this engine out to be something different from Crytek. You're sure Crytek was not happy losing a lot of their core engine devs to CIG? Should have paid them. I mean, very indicative to the whole talk. Crytek was also struggling to pay the people who were making their engine because making an engine seems to be kind of hard. Will we be going over Planetech V5? Curious, but don't know much about it. Yeah. So the stream, the CitizenCon presentation in a couple of weeks will probably have a panel based on Planetech V5, and I would encourage you to watch that panel when it's posted on YouTube, or you can join us on the stream. I'll be doing a live stream just like I am right now. You can subscribe to the channel. You can go onto the channel. If you go to my YouTube channel and you go to the live tab here, you will actually see that I have the stream scheduled for there. You can just hit this button, notify me, and it'll let you know when we're going live. We're going to do a stream just like this. I will be calling into people who are out there on the show floor during the day. I will have talks in between the panels. We'll do before and after of the CitizenCon event itself. And we'll be talking about Planetech V5, the Nix system, the economy, StarSim, whatever it is they decide to talk about. We still don't know. I think we'll get a schedule probably in the next couple of days, probably this Wednesday. We'll see a schedule come out about what they're going to talk about. But it's still a bit of a mystery. So that kind of wraps up my talk overall about game engine maintenance, about the difficulties that a lot of game studios are facing when it comes to trying to both simultaneously run a game engine and a game. I'm glad that like game engines have become more of a thing when it comes to developing talking about space games in general, video games. I didn't even really understand game engines a decade ago. But over the last 10 years, they've really started to share more about what makes a game engine, especially from CIG. I think I've learned a lot of the difficulties and problems that you can run into in developing your own game engine. And I think it's impressive when a company can do that. But it's also, there's like a sliding scale on whether or not you should have your own game engine, if you should rely on somebody else to develop that back end for you that you can then use to make the best game that you can for the vision that you have. And just like the costs that are involved with that. BioWare is a really... It's a really good example of this. I don't actually know. Hold on. Dragon Age... Veilguard game engine. I don't know which game engine they're using for that game. Is it still Frostbite? It is. So it would be really interesting to know how much they've changed the Frostbite engine for something like that. I think it's a really This would actually be a great example for today's talk. Because a lot of people associate the Frostbite engine with the reason that both Anthem and Mass Effect Andromeda fell short. So they took an engine that was built primarily for FPS games, Bad Company and Battlefield, and moved it over to RPGs, which maybe required a lot of work to get into the place where they could work for RPGs. But now you have Dragon Age Veilguard, which is coming out like 7 years later after those projects. And maybe they've just had enough time now to develop the Frostbite engine into something that could support an RPG. And maybe it works. We'll have to see. It comes out in a couple of weeks. So we'll see what it does. But yeah, overall, just it seems like the game engine conversation is a very important one to, I think, have a little more insight into now. And that's why I wanted to have this talk about Halo, about Star Citizen, about all the things. I hope you learned something from this one. Thanks for joining.